So today's focus is going to be on compound interest. Yesterday we used the simple interest formula where I for interest was equal to the principal, the amount you invested or borrowed, multiplied by the interest rate expressed as a decimal, multiplied by the time in years. What did we do if they gave us the time in months? Like they said 8 months. Divided by 12. What if they said 8 days? Divide by 365. Wicked. You have to make sure that the time is in years. Today's formula looks like this. A for the final amount at the end of the investment equals T, the principal. Okay, that's the amount you invest or borrow. So this would be the final amount of the investment, or this would be the final amount that you owe back to the bank or whoever you borrowed from. It's 1, the number 1. That's not an I, so it's write it as a 1. Plus R, the interest rate. It's still the interest rate. You still have to express the percentage as a decimal. So if R was 5%, you would use 0.05. If R was 1.2%, you would use 0.012. Divided by N, another new variable. It represents the compounding frequency. So if something was compounded weekly, N would be 52. What if something was compounded bi-weekly? 26. What if something was compounded semi-monthly? 24. Nice. What if something was compounded monthly? 12. You might see semi-annually. That's twice a year. You would use 2 for the compounding frequency. And then this is all raised, so I close the bracket, and this is all raised to the power of n, so that same number multiplied by t. T is the time in years. Fair? I'll scroll ahead to this terminology tango. I'll do the following. I'll just write them down. So if it says it is compounded let's go with daily. We'll start at the top. How many days are there? 365, so n would equal 365. If something is compounded weekly, n is equal to 52 weeks in a year. And you should write these down on your page somewhere. So in your notes, I think you have this. I'm going to add a few extra ones. So wherever you have this slide right here, next to that, you should write these. Bi-weekly is next. We know that one from our last unit. And is what? Yeah, you would get 26 checks is what we were talking about last unit. Then we had semi-monthly. That's twice a month. So like on the 15th and 30th of every month. What was n there? 24. Then we had monthly. N was what? 12. Nice. Let's go with quarterly. This is one you'll see. Every quarter. It's 4, yeah. Every 3 months they'd calculate interest. And there's semi-annually. There's another one that you'll see often. That's twice a year. N would equal 2. If it just says annually, they're only interest is only being compounded once a year. Make sure you have those, and then I'll show you how to sort it all out. Also, it's worth noting that the compound interest formula doesn't actually tell you how much interest you earn or how much interest you owe. It tells you the final amount of your investment or the final amount of what you borrowed, what you owe, which you could then use to find the interest. You would just subtract the principal from that final amount, and that would tell you how much interest you earned or interest you owe. Okay, so let's scroll right ahead to, these are the examples we did yesterday. Those are the answers to the sheet. Okay, this is called compound interest. Know that with compound interest, your interest actually earns interest. So compounded interest is better if you're borrowing, because you're going to earn money quicker than if it was just paid at simple interest. Compound interest would be worse in the case of your borrowing money. Okay? So when you're investing, compound interest is best. When you're borrowing, compound interest is worse. So simple interest would be the better option, because it adds up quicker. So let's go to this example right here. Do you have this on your sheet? It says Allison wants to invest $2,000. His bank offers an investment option that earns compound interest at a rate of 1.75% per year. And he's going to invest that money for 10 years. Write down the given information. And on this page, it tells you what A represents. It tells you what P represents, R represents, and T represents. Like, these are the same as yesterday. We talked about principal yesterday. We talked about the interest rate yesterday. And we talked about the time or the term of the investment. Remember, this had to be a decimal or in decimal form, and this had to be expressed in years. These are the new guys, all right? The final amount and the number of compounding periods. So in that particular question, what does this represent? The 2,000. That's the principal. So in this case, P equals $2,000. With me? Anyone see what the interest rate is? What's the interest? 1.75%. What would I use for my R value? What's 1.75% as a decimal? Divide that by 100, or just swing the decimal place 2 spots to the left. Do you know what T is? What's the term? How long is the investment for? It's 10 years. And I just noticed that it didn't tell us the compounding frequency. So let's add that. Let's say it's compound interest at a rate of 1.75%, but say it's compounded, let's go with that new one, quarterly. So we've got the term. What would that be? What would, if it's compounded quarterly, what variable does that help me with? N. What would N equal? If it's compounded quarterly, we said N would equal 4. Okay, N would equal 4. Now, suppose the question said, calculate the final amount of the investment. So that's what we want to do. Calculate the final amount. Period. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm looking for A. I know the formula for compound interest. I'm not using I equals P times R times T because it's not simple interest. It says compound interest. It means I have to use this formula. It's the principal. Open your bracket. 1 plus R divided by N raised to the power of N times T. And when I fill this in, What should I fill in for P? Look at your list of given information. $2,000 would go here. Left bracket, 1 plus. What should I fill in for the R value? The decimal, 0.0175. What should I fill in for the N value? 4. And then up here, I'm going to have that same number 4. N would go here. And what would I multiply it by? 10. Okay, so in order to do this calculation, we're going to need our calculators. The order of operation tells you to do what first? The brackets. So within the brackets, should I add the 0.0175 to the 1, or should I divide the 0.0175 by 4? I'm going to divide. Okay? So if I go 0.0175 and I divide that by 4, we're not going to round anything here. And I'm going to show you every step. This is what it would look like. And then I'll show you how to take some shortcuts. You cool with that? 0.0175 divided by 4 is the following number. And I wrote every number down. Then A would equal, I'm going to finish the bracket. What happens if I add those two numbers? What would I get inside the bracket? Yeah, I'm just going to add 1. So I just left that number in my calculator and I hit +1. Or if you look at these, it's going to make 1.004375. So the brackets are done. Now, should I multiply those two numbers together? No, because you don't. What do you do before you multiply? Your exponents. So let's figure out what that exponent is first, 4 times 10, and then let's figure out what 1.004375 raised to the power of whatever 4 times 10 is. Anyone know what 4 times 10 is? It's 40. Now, this is going to be a greasy number. Again, I don't multiply those two things together because you do not multiply before you do your exponents. What is 1.004375 raised to the power of 40? And this is something that you need to know on your calculator. You need to know how to put it in. So you need to know where the exponent button is. Anyone have an answer? Anyone get this number? 190791605. On your calculator, you're looking for this button. It's an arrow pointing up. Or it might say y to the power of x, or it might say x to the power of y. Some of the newer calculators look like this. It's got a little box with another little box. One of those. But make sure you can find it on your calculator, because you can't come up to me on the test and say, oh, I don't know where the exponent button is, and then expect me to punch it in and do your calculations for you. I'll do that today and I'll do that tomorrow and I'll help you figure that out. But when it comes test time, you need to know how to do that. Is there anyone who can't find the exponent button on your calculator? If so, come up here, I'll pause the video and I'll show you where it is. That answer that's in my calculator. So we're picking back up. Everyone knows how their calculator works. I've got the 1.190791605 in my calculator already. Then I multiply by 2,000. And that gives me my final answer of $2,381.58. Okay, that is the final amount. Now, if you just wanted to know the interest portion of that, what would it be? What would you have to do to that number? You would subtract 2,000, you would subtract the principal. So $381.58 would be the interest. Now it only asked me for the final amount, so that's all I would need to do. And if you're looking for a shortcut for this question, you can actually just write this down. You should show me what you filled in, but I can do it all from my calculator. I can start inside the brackets with the 0.0175, divide it by 4. Okay, there's the 0.04375. I add 1, that finishes inside the brackets. I raise it to the power of 40 because that's what 4 times 10 is. And then I multiply by 2,000. There's my 2381. So you don't have to show every step. The reason I did this is so that when you're looking at it from home, okay, you know what you're doing. Next question. Let's not do the compounded annually because that's just a 1. Let's go with this one here. Okay? So everyone find this question on your sheet. And I'm going to add 2 parts to it. So wherever it says for 3 years, after the period, say calculate the final amount and the interest. And this would be interest earned because it's an investment. Here's the formula I'm going to use. Let's write down our given information. What does this number represent right here? It's the investment. It's the principal. Common mistake when we were doing simple interest, people think that investment represents the I. No, that's the interest. So the principal is $6,000. It's not always going to say investment. What else could they say? What other word could they use to represent the principal? Borrowed. That's right. Nice job. What does this represent? The 4%. Okay, what is it though? Which variable? A, if it's not A, it could be P, R, N, or T. It's R, wicked. And 4% as a decimal, 0.04. Divide by 100. Compounded semi-annually. So I know it's compound interest. I know I need the big formula. Semi-annually, what's my N value? What was it? It's 2. Nice. Okay. And I'm leaving it in the bank for 3 years. What's that? What does the 3 represent? That's the time. And it's in years. So I don't have to divide by 12 like I do if it's in months, or divide by 365 like I do if it's in years. I want to know A. So let's find A. Fill this in. It's 6,000 times 1 plus 0.04 divided by 2. Close the bracket and then raise that all to the power of 2 times what? 3. I'm just filling that given information. So every time you do one of these questions, you should write this down. And if I want to speed things up a little bit here, I'll go 6,000. Does anyone know what 0.04 divided by 2 is? 0.02. And if I add 1, I'd get 1.02. What's 2 times 3? 6. And then I'm going to go 6,000 times, I don't know what 1.02 to the power of 6 is. It's going to be 1 point something. It just means 1.02 times 1.02 times 1.02 6 times. You can do that quickly in your calculator with the exponent button. Make sure you write this full decimal, 1.02. 12,616,2419. Now, if you don't want to write the decimal, great. What can you do with that number? Multiply it by how much? 6,000. Thank you. That gives me $6,756.97. That's the final amount. So there's the answer to part 1. We'll call it part A, maybe. Calculate the final amount. And part B, the interest earned. So this is part A. How would I do part B? How do I calculate the interest? I'm going to take the final amount and I'm going to subtract the principal. So the interest is $6,756.97 minus the principal, $6,000, and I get interest of $756.97, which is not a bad deal. I stashed some money in the bank, and I was able to build it up to $6,756.97. I earned $756.97. How can I earn more money? I could invest more. I could increase the principal. I could leave it for longer. I could find a higher what? Rate, a better rate. Okay? So those are important decisions when you're thinking about investing money. Also, on the flip side of the coin, if you're borrowing money, would you want a higher rate? No, you'd want the lower rate. Okay? And you would want a shorter term. And you'd want to borrow less money. Well, I mean, you got to borrow what you need to borrow. Depends on what the project is you're borrowing the money for. There's only 2 ways to get the money. You can earn it, or you can borrow it from the bank. Everyone okay with that? You can go to work on the compound interest worksheet. If anyone needs a hand, we can sit at the back table.